All right, welcome back to another Zoids review. So this is going to be what I would probably consider the final of the Hasbro Zoids Wild Kit reviews, and that is because after, basically a full year has passed, we've got no new news regarding to the Hasbro English licensed Zoids Wild Kits, no Wave 2, no other kits being localized. It just seems like Hasbro has basically abandoned the brand once again, and we've sort of given up hope on it. The majority of the fan base kind of just stopped paying attention months ago and said, "Yeah, it's done. There's no chance that we're going to get anything else," and it is what it is. So this is probably the last one I'm going to be doing a video on, unless I decide to randomly pick up one of the little Raptors, because Hobbytown does still have a few of those, which is pretty great. I didn't originally intend on getting this one, but I actually got two of these, one for myself and one to give away as a prize at our Zoids panel at Anime Week in Atlanta last year, the video for which is on the channel if you guys want to see it. So I was going to get a couple of these to give away as a raffle. I also gave away an HMM as well at that panel. But I figured, well, if I'm going to go ahead and give one out, I might as well go ahead and get one for content. And I also really, really love the version of this exact same Zoid that is done for Zoids Wild Zero. And so I figured, I like that version so much, why not get the original and talk about it as well? So in Japan, for the Takara Tomy line, this was known as the Gannontoise. And here in the English Hasbro version, it's just simply known as Tanks, which, if I didn't say so before, is unique for the Zoids Wild line for them to sort of anglicize the names like that and change them into translation. Most of the names of all of the Zoids throughout all of the previous eras were kept exactly the same, with a couple of exceptions, namely the Saber Tiger being changed to Zaberfang, and just to kind of go with the whole punny Z-name theming, and then Berserk Fuhrer being changed to Berserk Fury to avoid any references to the notable person we refer to as Fuhrer from history, and that's about it. But otherwise, this is kind of unique for them to just simply change the names like that. I think that all of the English names are kind of inferior. I think Ruin sounds cool, but there was no reason why you couldn't have just called it Gilraptor. Calling the Wild Liger just Liger, I guess, makes sense for the characters, but is a little bit confusing in the greater continuity of Zoids. I don't know why they couldn't have just called it Wild Liger, but I digress. So this is the Zoid used by the character known as Onigiri in the Japanese version, who is known as Analog in the English version. And I gotta be honest, I really don't like his design. He looks very silly, but it is kind of appropriate for the art style of Zoids Wild, which was also just inherently very silly. And his whole purpose in the story, more or less, is that he is a sort of child prodigy scientist who is studying Zoids and studying their relationships with humans. And he takes Arashi as sort of a oddity or something to study and explore because of his unique relationship with the Wild Liger. So it's sort of this nature versus nurture kind of thing, of where he's a strictly analytical mind and trying to relate to this instinct-driven, compassion-driven type of mindset that Arashi has. And it's not exactly a unique character dynamic. It's actually kind of tropey, even for kid stuff, but it's harmless, and it does kind of serve the purpose of moving Arashi's character arc forward. The Zoid also does make an appearance in the Zoids Wild Blast video game for the Switch, where it is playable, and it's one of the more fun ones to play in that game, even though it is, this small, turtle-like dinosaur. It actually is pretty fun to play as. So I'm not a big fan, onto the kit itself, I'm not a big fan of this bright sort of teal, turquoise, aqua color armor here. I'm sure Michelle will correct me on which color it actually is, but it's very bright. It's a little in your face, and that was the case with most of the primary colors in a lot of the Zoids Wild kits. But I really do like the detail on the armor. I think that looks really cool. And I like the fact that it's also, from a design standpoint, incredibly subtle, because it is disguising a cannon underneath. So it's sort of the evolution of the same concept as the cannon tortoise from the original series, if I can get that to fold down. So that this piece kind of moves down to shield its head, and then this piece right here flips open to reveal the cannon itself, and the cannon extends out, and there's our little analog pilot back there, who again is molded for the toy line. And he doesn't look, I mean, he looks like he does in the show, which is pretty bad. It looks a bit out of place on this thing, but yeah, the model for the cannon looks really cool, and the whole sliding back and forth is awesome, because you kind of get it can slide back into battery as sort of a recoil effect there, which is pretty cool. And the fact that all of this is completely hidden away is really cool, and it also kind of allows the Gannontoise to avoid the biggest problem that a lot of people call out from a, nerdy nitpick standpoint with the Zoids Wild. Zoids is the exposed pilot on top of the back of the Zoid, who would get immediately just kind of blown away by any kind of combat or action that would ensue. Another thing that's really cool, I'm going to go ahead and get the box out of the way before it falls over again. We'll show off the box again here in a second, but this bar right here is where the two halves of this piece of armor connect to each other, but that bar also locks into the top of the cannon at the top there. That is something that the successor to the Zoid, which we'll talk about here in a second, actually does not do. The eyes look pretty good, even for the English localized version, which the Japanese version is obviously going to look better because the eyes are not molded into the head like that, and they have that nice metallic look to them. The caps are this inoffensive orange. They do add a lot of nice contrast to the total color of the Zoid without looking too hideously ugly. And then, as is per, they get a little nubby tail there, as is per the usual with the Zoids Wild Kits, they have remolded some of the black plastic in gray to offer more color contrast as well. So maybe that's a preference that you enjoy with these, or maybe you prefer the original Japanese color scheme a little bit more as well. I talked about that a lot more in the Wild Liger review and in the Gill Raptor Ruin comparison, where I showed the difference in the color scheme between the English and the Japanese version. So this lever back here is where you would operate the motorized function. Of course, I don't put batteries in these, so I can long-term preserve them. And let's go ahead and look at the box a little bit before we move on to the successor to this Zoid. So the artwork does look pretty cool there, and these boxes, like I mentioned in some of the previous videos, are really kind of silly because they're this weird cereal box in a vertical orientation, whereas the Japanese boxes were in a sort of landscape orientation and were a little bit thicker, so there was more room for the pieces. I guess these were meant to like fit on pegs at stores, although you gotta have stores actually carry them in order to put them on pegs. And inside here, of course, is the instruction booklet and the little battlefield arena thing that nobody will ever use. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and do a little comparison between the Gannontoise, or tanks as it's known in the US, with the Japanese Bazutile from Zoids Wild Zero. So this is the successor to this Zoid for Zoids Wild Zero. It's the same exact model underneath, just retooled, and has the exterior armor pieces remolded. And as I've said dozens of times before with the Zoids Wild Zero kits, the changes they made going from the original Zoids Wild version to the Wild Zero version just make it night and day a completely different and often much better, much cooler looking Zoid. So I vastly prefer the Bazutile. I've had this kit for a while. The review of that is up on the channel. I probably made that like a year and a half ago. And just everything down to the color and all the details I prefer significantly over the Gannontoise here. But one thing that you can see plain as day that I've already talked about in the Gannontoise review is that the cannon is not concealed in any kind of way. In fact, it has this silly kind of, I'm going to fold backwards over the back of the Zoid kind of motion, almost like the dual sniper rifle with the Koenig Wolf in a way. But essentially the same thing happens. You have the that really cool red visor color right there over the face, and I'm pretty sure it also has eyes under that if we take that piece off. But this piece right here, the front armor that kind of covers the head for a little bit there, doesn't lock into anything, and then the back of the armor raises up like that. The cannon is able to in battery, it's able to move outward, and then the barrel itself is able to flip downward like that, which gives you this really awesome, very menacing look. And then, of course, it's got additional guns up here, and then the missile pods that flip out on the side like that. which can flip forward. The Gannontoise does not have any kind of moving part on the side here. This is just a static piece of armor. So I think they figured, well, we've got something over there already, so if we just add an extra hinge to that piece, we can have another weapon over there on the side, which I just think is really cool and a really great opportunity there. So yeah, if you're looking to pick up one of these guys, the Bazootyl should be available online from some of the Japanese import sites still. It's probably a little bit harder to find now that the Zoids Wild Zero kits are more or less out of print. So definitely try to get one while you still can. And you can probably even find the original Japanese Takara Tomy Gannontoise as well if you'd look hard enough. But you should also be able to find this Hasbro version, you know, on clearance at, I think, what was it, Kohl's that had these we found out recently, or Ross or something like that. But obviously I got this one at Hobbytown, and they still order some from time to time. So unfortunately not a whole lot else there to say, but if I ever finish the entirety of the Zoids Wild anime, which I do intend to do, I'm not going to skip out on it and call it lame or anything like that. But when I do eventually go back and finish it, if I have anything else that is substantive or significant to say about the Bazootyl, then I'll go back and revisit this kit. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.